Once kin to the stout folk of the mountains, the Dawi turned their backs upon their ancestors and bent the knee to a bull-headed god of fire and greed, Hashut, the father of darkness. In the ash-choked Darklands, where rivers run with fire and the skies are black with smoke, they built their hellish capital, Zar-na-Grund, a colossal ziggurat, half temple, half factory, where slaves scream beneath furnaces and demons are bound in iron chains. There is no cruelty greater in this world than that of the Chaos Dwarf. Their empire is not sustained by their own hands alone. Their foundries are fed by slaves beyond counting, orcs dragged from their tribes, goblins driven in droves, men and ogres broken on the lash. Every hammer blow, every scream of tortured metal is bought with blood. Yet for all their sorcery and industry, the Dawi are never content. They sought a slave strong enough, disciplined enough to keep the others in line, a breed of overseers who can both fight and enforce order. And so, in their pride, they turned to foul works of sorcery and science. From twisted rites and dark experiments came the Black Orcs. Bigger, stronger, tougher than any other greenskin, broad of shoulder, clad in iron, with discipline rare amongst their kind. To the Chaos Dwarfs, they had seemed the perfect answer, soldiers who would never falter, masters over lesser orcs and goblins. But there was a flaw. The Black Orcs possessed more than strength, they possessed will. And no chain, no lash, no demon-forged collar could bend that will forever. In secret, the Black Orcs whispered amongst themselves. They whispered, they schemed. Slowly they drew the other slaves to their cause. Orc mobs that hungered for freedom, goblins chittered with hope of breaking chains, and even hobgoblins, used to the open spaces of the steppes rather than this dark confinement, flocked to the banner of rebellion. When the signal came, the pits boiled over. It was no riot, no brawl, it was war. The Black Orcs led an uprising vast enough to shake the very ziggurat of Zar-na-Grund to its foundations. The Great Rebellion had begun. Legends say it lasted weeks. Their furnace fell silent, the forges went cold, and Zar-na-Grund itself shook beneath the fury of the greenskin horde. The rebellion struck in waves, crashing against the ziggurat. Tier by tier the slaves surged upwards, battering down gates, flooding across terraces. Each level became a battlefield, orcs smashing Dawi warriors, goblins swarming like vermin through cracks and tunnels, Black Orc champions cutting bloody paths through iron ranks. Then the greenskins sieged the Chaos Dwarfs' own engines of war. Siege guns thundered against their masters' walls. Demon-bound war machines spat fire into the fortress they once defended. The Chaos Dwarfs, proud though they were driven back, forced to retreat higher and higher into the great ziggurat. Outnumbered 100 to 1, with the enemy pouring through every gate and tunnel, the Dawi faced annihilation. Without their weapons, without hope of aid, their end seemed certain. At that moment, friend, the Chaos Dwarfs teetered on the very brink of extinction. But treachery runs thicker than blood. The hobgoblins, sly and craven as ever, with an ancient desire to lord over other greenskins, looked upon the battle and saw their chance. When the Black Orc's momentum was at its height, the hobgoblins struck, not at the dwarves, but at their supposed allies. They sabotaged the captured engines, cut down orc and goblin leaders from the rear and flanks, and sowed chaos in the ranks. Blades in the back, poison in the dark, 1,000 little betrayals in a single night. The tide turned in an instant. The Chaos Dwarfs, freed from their noose, surged forth. They crushed the rebellion in a storm of fire and steel. The streets of Zar-na-Grund ran black with greenskin blood. In the end, the Black Orc rebellion was broken, but not destroyed. Many Black Orcs fell, aye, but many more escaped, fleeing into the Darklands. There they founded tribes of their own, far stronger and more disciplined than common orcs. From that day forth, the Black Orcs became the mightiest of all greenskin breed, disciplined, iron-willed and feared. As for the Chaos Dwarfs, never again would they trust the Black Orcs in chains. Instead they rewarded the hobgoblins with the station of overseers, giving them whips and power over their kin. Yet do not think this made the hobgoblins equals. The Dawizar despised them still, using them as tools, mocking them as traitors. And the greenskin tribes, they have never forgotten. To an orc or goblin, hobgoblin is a word that stinks of treachery, betrayal and cowardice, a curse spat with hatred. And so the Black Orc Rebellion passed into legend, a tale of defiance and treachery, of slaves who nearly toppled an empire. Some even whisper that amongst the rebels was a runt who would grow into the greatest of all greenskin warlords, Grimgor Ironhide himself. If true, then the rebellion's fires forged him into the terror he became, the scourge of the old world. But whether truth or tavern tale, no scribe can say. What is certain is this: the Black Orcs were born in chains, but their rebellion made them eternal. There are more stories about where Luthor Harkon came from than there are stars in the sky. Some swear he was once a necromancer of the Empire, chased by witch hunters until he fled to the seas. Others insist he hailed from Ostermark, from the city of Beckhaven itself, which is why he named his capital in Lustria New Beckhaven. Still others mutter he came from some forgotten tribe in the east. But most who claim to know the truth will tell you he was born in the deserts of Nekahara, a noble named Luthor of the Harkoni. He rose high in the service of the vampire Abarash, master of harbours and keeper of ships, and so the sea was already in his blood long before his coffin ever touched the waves. When Lemir fell, Luthor fled into the sands with his sire, wandering through decades of ruin. He himself has claimed he cannot remember the night he first drank blood, only that he woke one day immortal, cursed, and already mad. Centuries later, a Norscan longship boarded what they thought was an imperial trade ship. During the raid, the Norscan raiders stole a precious antique coffin, not knowing that vampire Luthor Harkon resided within. When the Norse vessel finally washed ashore in a storm on the coast of Lustria, all aboard had already drowned, starved to death, or been drained of all their blood. On a storm-tossed beach, Luthor stepped out of his coffin to see the devastation of the washed-up ship and its dead crew. With his ancient dark necromancy, he raised the corpses around him to create his first zombie pirate crew, binding them as his thralls. From that moment onward, he crowned himself emperor, decking his corpse courts in stolen jewels, issuing commands to zombie courtiers, and splitting the coast into provinces like a true monarch. Mad he may have been, aye, but his madness birthed an empire that has haunted the seas ever since. The stretch of shoreline they call the Vampire Coast is death itself. Its reefs smashed hulls, its fog blinds even the sharpest lookout, and its currents drag ships down into the depths. There Harkon waits, luring crews with false beacons and siren song, drowning them, then raising them as his own. Each new wreck swells his ranks, each drowned sailor becomes another corpse to row or fight. Over the centuries, his fleets have become a graveyard made flesh. He splits the coast into provinces, each ruled by a vampire, ghoul, or some foul creature loyal only through terror. His capital, New Beckhaven, mocks the old world city, its halls full of corpses that play at court. On the surface, New Beckhaven seems like a port town. There are docks, markets, taverns, and even a temple. Some 2,500 mortals dwell there, though their lives are lived under a constant shadow. At day they shuffle through their tasks, maintaining the docks and tending the fields. At night they vanish indoors, whispering that disappearances and horrors are merely Harkon's will. For beneath the pretense of normal life lies the truth. It is a reserve, a feeding ground, and those who live there are but livestock for their vampire master. Yet not all within the city are wholly cowed. The Gravesend Inn, the only tavern, still operates to this day, serving weary sailors and frightened townsfolk. At night its doors open to the undead with a grim night menu laid before guests and vampires alike. The inn's master, Diogo Mendes, is said to be descended from a shipwrecked sailor spared long ago. He is whispered to shelter a secret resistance, a band called Moore's Stakes, who strike in secret at the undead. New Beckhaven is no mere capital. It is a city of cruelty dressed as normal life, where the dead walk openly and the living survive only at their master's whim. Inland, he wages wars against the lizard folk, sacking the temple city of Axotl and dragging back relics and captives. The jungles strike at him again and again, but like a weed he always rises. His forts are rebuilt, his fleets return, and his laughter rides the waves. Do not think his soldiers are witless graveyard shamblers. Harkon's armies are sailors and corsairs, corpses of men who once knew the sea, bound to him in endless servitude. They fight as they did in life, cutlasses rusted but still deadly in their hands, pistols clenched in rotting fingers. Even in death they march with the discipline of a crew. There are the deckhand mobs, the drowned rank and file, stumbling forward in sea regs, their eyes hollow but their blades sharp. There are those arms of pole arms, corpses who drag down beasts and spear horse and rider alike. Gunnery mobs still clutch muskets and bombs, firing with wet powder and broken hands, their shots ragged but unrelenting. The sirens drift among them, pale sea maidens whose voices lure men to their doom, their ghostly claws raking flesh. And then there are the Depth Guard, his chosen warriors, clad in rusted armour, relentless in battle, cutting a path through the living with a fury that never tires. Worse even than the drowned crews are the horrors Harkon drags from the deep. Some are twisted corpses of great beasts, others are nightmares made flesh by necromancy. The animated hulks are ogre-sized corpses lashed together with timbers and chains, lumbering wrecks that crash through walls and men alike. The rotting Prometheans are crabs as large as houses, their shells split and blackened, ridden by shrieking zombies. Greater still are the rotting Leviathans, moving islands of shell and barnacle, who drag entire ships beneath the waves. The Morghuls are pale horrors with gaping maws, striking from the fog and devouring men whole, leaving only bones. They say Harkon is touched by a curse that makes him different from other vampires. He cannot wield sorcery like his kin, for some flaw severs him from the winds of magic, but instead of weakening him, it makes him stranger still, for he creates a field around him that stifles the spell of others. Wizards find their tongues heavy and their runes dim in his presence. Some say it is this curse that drove him mad, splitting his mind into voices, so that he talks to ghosts no one else can see. For whether mad or not, he endures, and his empire endures with him. Our tale begins with the ancestor gods, Grungni, Grimnir and Valea. They walked amongst us in the early days, teaching the dwarves craft, courage and hearth. From them they learned how to hew mountains, forge steel and protect their kin. The first great halls rose in those days, delved deep into the bones of the world. It was a time of plenty, when every strike of the pick uncovered wonders. Their halls glittered like gems across the world-edge mountains, and their forges blazed without rest. It is said that no blade was sharper, no armour stronger than that wrought by dwarven hands. For a while, the world itself seemed at peace. The peace was shattered when the world was split asunder in fire and madness. The coming of chaos turned the earth and sky, rendering the very mountains. Winds of sorcery, wild and many-coloured, howled across the lands, yet the Dawi were not caught unawares. For the ancestor god Grungni had warned that such doom might come, and bade his folk to seek refuge deep beneath the stone. There they sheltered. When at last the tempest passed, they emerged to find a world changed forever. The air was fouled with the dust of warpstone, beasts roamed twisted and savage, and worst of all, demons stalked the mountains. Their hosts assailed the dwarven holds with murderous fury. But the ancestor gods gave the dwarves the tools to save their people. Grungni taught craft of runes, carving power into steel so axes and mail might stand against such horrors. Valea wove her wards round to their empire, blunting the black magics of their foes. And at the forefront strode Grimnir, the war god incarnate, clad in armour harder than mountains and wielding twin axes blazing with fury. With Grimnir leading the throngs, they drove the demons back, clearing the world's edge mountains of their filth. For a time. It was then in that age of storm that the Dawi first met the elves. A fleet led by Calador Dragon Tamer, Mage and Prince, had been driven to our coasts after their own battle with Chaos. He crossed paths with none other than Grimnir himself, who was pursuing the broken remnants of a demon host. What they thought of one another was never recorded, but when beastmen fell upon them both, the two joined arms, Grimnir's axes hewing, Calador's spells blazing. The foe was slain, and so the first bond between the Dawi and the elves was forged. From Calador, the dwarves learned of Venarian, Phoenix King of Ulthuan, and his struggle to free that far isle from chaos. From Grimnir, Calador heard of a storm from the north that had loosed demons upon the world. Calador, wise in sorcery, spoke of a gate torn open in the far north, a wound in the world itself. Yet the respite was brief. Soon the skies blackened again and demons surged in numbers too great even for Grimnir's fury. The holds were pressed hard, many falling beneath the tide. Grimnir, knowing the source, swore to march north and close the Chaos Gate itself. Gungi warned him it was his death, but Grimnir answered it was a death worth taking. He shaved his head, leaving only a single crest, and gave one axe to his son Morgrim. With Morgrim and a company of warriors he journeyed north, until only Grimnir pressed on into the poisoned wastes, a lone figure vanished into the haze. No Dawi ever saw him again. Some say he fell battling demons uncounted, others that he reached the gate itself and held it against the horde, while Calador wrought his great vortex in Ulthuan. Some say he fights there still. Calador's great spell at last drained the rampant magic from the world, pulling it into the great vortex. The demon host faded like smoke, vanishing from the gates of the dwarfs in an instant. The war was done. The ancestor gods themselves were gone too. Grungni, Valea, Grimnir, and the others vanished. Some say they returned to the heart of the mountains, waiting for the day their folk needed of them again. So dawned a new age for the Dawi. They rebuilt, prospered, and their halls rang with hammers once more. Yet of their kin who had wandered east towards the mountains of Morn, or those who dwelt farther north, no word ever came. Now let me tell you of the greatest grudge ever carved. The alliance of elves and dwarves continued for an age. They traded, feasted, and fought side by side. But mistrust festered. This was known by the Witch King Malekith, cursed be his name, who stirred envy and suspicion between the two peoples. He whispered lies into elven ears, told them dwarves grew greedy, grasping, heavy-handed. Eventually the Witch King ordered dark elves dressed as high elves to attack dwarven caravans. Some dwarves retaliated on those they thought that wronged them. High King Gotrek Starbreaker, grim of brow but wise, still sought words before war. So he sent his advisor, Thorek Grimbuk, across the sea to Ulthuan, bearing hopes that old friendship with the elves might yet be mended. But when Thorek reached the Phoenix King's halls, the air was already heavy with suspicion. Calador II, arrogant and sharp-tongued, accused the Dawi straight away. He spat when Thorek crossed the seas. The city of Khor-Vaneth in the Old World had been put to flame by none other than Prince Snorri Halfhand, son and heir to Gotrek himself. Thorek swore the dwarves knew nothing of this burning, nor did they give it leave. He laid down fair terms instead, that the elves should pay recompense for their slights, offer apology for their grievances piled against the Dawi, and swear that no further blood be shed. But Calador II sneered. He said he answered not to demands but to pleas, and mocked that if the High King could not master his own king, what weight had his words. Then he gave the order, "Seize the ambassadors." Steel rang, the Dawi resisted, and one of their number was slain. Thoric and his companions were taken in chains. Calador II gave a command that carved deeper than any blade. He ordered the beards of the dwarf envoys to be cut off. Mark it well, there is no deeper insult to the dwarven people, more than we could ever understand. So back they were sent, humiliated, bloodied and beardless, and with them went Calador's final scorn, that if Scotric Starbreaker sought payment, he should come take it with his own hands in Ulthuan. The War of the Beard had begun. Words turned to blades. The elves thought their sorcery would win the day, but the mountains teach patience, and steel remembers its purpose. The dwarven throngs marched from the holds, axes bright, banners snapping in the wind. Elf mages called fire from the skies, but the Dawi met it with rune-warded mail. For centuries it dragged on. Forests burned to ash, rivers ran red, and holds shook with thunder of cannon and bolt thrower. The elf hosts cut through with grace and guile, but every blow they dealt, the dwarfs repaid thricefold. Neither side bent, and so both bled. Until the Battle of the Three Towers. After centuries of bloodletting, the hosts of Ulthuan and the Karazhan faced one another in a final storm of ruin, and in the thick of that carnage strode two crowned foes who met in deadly hand-to-hand combat, King Gorek Starbreak of the Dwarfs and High King of Karaz-Karak, and Calador II, arrogant Phoenix King of the Elves. The field hushed when he met. Calador struck first, quick as lightning, his blade a serpent's tongue of magical steel. Blow after blow, the Elf King raged, yet the dwarf did not yield an inch. At last, with a roar that shook the banners, Gotrek swung his runic hammer in a mighty arc. It smashed aside the Phoenix King's lunges and crushed the Elven King's magical armour. Both armies watched as the High King seized the Elf Monarch's Phoenix crown as a trophy and returned it to Karaz-Karak, where it remains to this day. The dwarves roared their triumph, but it was not joy, it was grim satisfaction, the settling of a debt, a grudge settled. The elves slunk back to Ulthuan, hearing that Malekith and his Dark Elves had invaded their homeland and no longer had the strength to fight two fronts, and sailed home, humbled and broken. There was no time for victory celebrations for the Dawi. The long war had left their empire and their people at the edge of ruin. They set back to their mountain holes, never to regain their former strength. Mark my words, even though settled, no pint, no age, no crown will ever see that grudge erased. To this day, when a Dawi sees a pointed ear, he feels the echo of that wall in his beard and bones. The Damaz Kron holds it still, writ larger than any other, that Elgi betrayed the Dawi, and the Dawi do not forgive. In ages long past, when the Dwarf Empire stood at its height, there was carved into the heart of the World Edge Mountains a hold of unrivaled splendour, Carrick 8 Peaks. Beneath its 8 jagged summits the halls and mines stretched deep, its courtyards grand, its forges busy, and its vaults heavy with the riches of stone and metal. Its walls above ground could daunt any foe, and its subterranean defences were the pride of Dawi engineering. But even the greatest fortress can have a hidden wound. From below the Skaven, cunning and patient schemed for centuries. Clans were assigned secret missions to burrow underneath the hold and into its long-neglected depths. Over a century they tunnelled, seeking hidden shafts, weak seams, and the waterworks of the city. As their plans matured, the surface world convulsed. Volcanoes to the south erupted, ash blackened skies, crops failed, and famine and chaos spread among the surrounding lands. The dwarfs, seeking safety, retreated behind their ramparts, but in doing, they turned their backs on their outer lands, allowing the green-skinned hordes to press nearer. Thus the stage was set: starvation, isolation, and subterranean betrayal. First, Skaven forces struck through hidden tunnels and undermined the city's water supplies, contaminating wells with warpstone taint, while goblins and orcs rallied above. The Dawi fought back fiercely in the lower levels, deploying runes, traps and iron breakers, but the tide of enemies was enormous and cunning. Then the Skaven unleashed their deadliest trick, Poison Wind. Gas blast that filled tunnels with foul breath. Armour could not stop it. the defenders choked and fell as their lines broke. From the upper levels the greenskins stormed, orcs, goblins, night goblins, each crashing against stone walls, each wave heavier than the last. The dwarfs were squeezed from below and assaulted from above. The hold groaned, pillars cracked, corridors collapsed. When all was lost, the last dwarfs sealed the sacred shrines, took what treasures they could carry and withdrew through secret passages. Carrick 8 Peaks had fallen, its halls overrun, its stones defiled. A wound that would never heal, as the dwarfs to this day dream of taking back their ancient hold. After the loss of proud Carricks in the east, Carrick 8 Peaks, Carrick Asgul, Carrick Drazug, the refugees founded new holds, Carrick Norn and Carrick Isa, rich in copper and iron if not the splendour of the Everpeak. As the forges blazed anew, trade routes reopened, linking these young strongholds with the old heartland, and in their wanderings the Dawi came across the scattered tribes of men. Fierce, strong-lived folk locked in endless war with the greenskins of the lowlands. In them the Dawi found common cause. High King Kurgan Ironbeard, travelling with an envoy bound for the Grey Mountains, was waylaid to a vast orc horde. The throng fought until the earth was piled high with corpses, but in the end the High King was taken captive. Fortune, or perhaps the ancestor gods, had set these lands in the domain of the Umbergerton tribe, led by the warrior prince, Sigmar Heldenhammer. Sigmar and his warband fell upon the orcs with fury, yet the orc warlord was a monster clad in iron, wielding a flaming axe. Sigmar's bronze swords could not pierce him, and the lad near met his doom. In that dark hour, Kurgan Ironbeard broke free of his bonds and hurled his greatest treasure, the rune-forged hammer Galmaraz, the Skull Splitter, to Sigmar. The prince caught it, and with blows like thunder, he shattered the orc warlord's hand, and then his skull. When the battle was done, Sigmar sought to return the hammer, but Kurgan saw the truth with the dwarf's eye. The weapon had chosen its bearer. In Sigmar he beheld honour, strength and nobility fit for the ages, so the High King gifted Galmarez to the man. An act unheard of in all dwarven histories, and one that forged a brotherhood that endures still. With Galmarez in hand, Sigmar set about uniting the squabbling tribes of men, and not a moment too soon, for word came of an orc horde vast beyond reckoning was marching on Blackfire Pass. Sigmar silenced the bickering chiefs and bound them into one host to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Dawi. When the horde smashed through Kurgan's wall at the pass, Sigmar's army struck first, hammering the orcs back. Then from the flanks the Dawi charged, iron and steel biting deep. The slaughter was great, the crows fed for years, and the orcs broke. Sigmar himself smote Urgluk Bloodfang, shattering the Black Orc warlord's cleaver hand and then his skull. That victory was the salvation of both races. In gratitude, King Kurgan commanded the crafting of the 12 runefangs, mighty blades to be borne by the lords of men. A year later, crowned in Reichdorf with a diadem of gold and ivory, a Dawi gift, Sigmar Heldenhammer became the first emperor of man. Thus became an age of brotherhood, trade and war shared side by side. The Dawi marched with the empire in 100 battles against orcs, ogres, vampires and worse. Dwarven engineers gifted the men black powder and steel, though never their deepest secrets, and the masons taught them to build stone that would not sag. They in turn gave the dwarf coin, grain, and stout companions in battle. Aye, the dwarves grumble at the humans' short lives, their weak stomach for ale, and their folly in chasing glory or listening to the whispers of chaos. But when true foes come, the sons of Sigmar stand fast, and the dwarves stand with them. For in the crucible of the Blackfire Pass, the oath was struck, sealed in blood, steel and stone, and by Grogny's beard it shall endure until the world's ending. Both races swore to eternally support when the other calls for aid, and a dwarf never breaks a promise. Through centuries, men and dwarf fought and died together, all the way to winning the great war against chaos and the defeat of the ever-chosen Azavar Kul. To this day, the dwarfs endure. The mountains are their bones, the tunnels their veins, and the strongholds their heart. Others see only cold rock and snow, the dwarfs see home. Unlike their kin, the forest goblins ain't creatures of the open plains of the Badlands or the dark under the mountains. They belong to the eerie woodland of the Warhammer world, with most of them under the mist and the rot of the Drakwold forest. Deep within that tangled canopy lies the Black Pit. The locals who know of it say the pit isn't just a place, it's hungry. They speak of tunnels that lead nowhere, of roots that move like fingers, and of shadows that twitch even when no light dares to fall. The air itself feels thick and damp, crawling under your skin like something alive. You can't take 3 steps without hearing something skitter just out of sight. At the centre of it all yawns the pit, a colossal sinkhole lined with black rock and ancient roots, plunging deep into the underworld. The shamans say it's where the spider god first crawled out of the earth, dragging a web of nightmares behind it. The forest goblins throw captives down into that abyss, men, elves, even other goblins, listening to the screams fade in the dark. And then, from the depths they come, the arachnorocks, the god spiders, dragging themselves up, shedding dust and bone as they rise. Their eyes gleam like dying stars. The goblins scream and dance, bathing in venom and blood, welcoming these demigods to the surface world once more. These creatures are ancient beyond reckoning, birthed in the deepest chasms beneath the earth, where the stone drips with venom. Each arachnorok is colossal, a walking shrine, a living altar. Where such a creature stirs from its lair, the forest itself trembles. Its legs thicker than oaks, its fangs as long as spears. They carry an entire warband on their backs, led by spider shamans, chanting and hissing, surrounded by their followers in ecstasy. When the arachnoroks rise, the Black Pit becomes a place where life and death blur, where the spiders rule and where even chaos demons tread lightly. For when trespassers move into their territory, these gigantic spiders create a border barrier made of diamond-tough web, making escape impossible, and then the spiders feast. So how did the forest goblins come to worship these monsters? Well, every goblin's got a god. The night goblins mumble to Gork and Mork in the dark. The common tribes howl at the moon. But the forest goblins, they found something far more venomous. Long ago, shamans led a horde of nomadic goblins daring to move through the dark forest. They were starting to be picked off by eight-legged horrors that dwelled there, and every day became a fight for their lives. Until the shamans stumbled upon a cavern bigger than any temple, its walls slick with silk. At its heart hung a great cocoon, trembling with life. When they cut it open with foolish excitement, out crawled an infant spider the size of an ox, eyes burning like black jewels. They say it bit one of them, but did not kill him. Instead, its venom burned through his veins, showing him visions, webs of fate, dark power, and the knowledge of a spider god that ruled beneath bark and dirt, the feaster from beyond. Jealous, the other shamans gave themselves to the spiders to also feel their so-called gifts. Their followers followed suit, realizing that it is better to appease these spiders of the woods rather than oppose them, and so the spider cult was born. Ever since, forest goblins set out alone into the wilderness to experiment with the venom of different spiders, from the smallest to the titanic. Most fail to live through these dangerous rites, but if he survives, he returns covered in scars and bites, half delirious, but changed. He mutters in clicks and hisses, sees omens in the twitch of a leg or the pattern of a web. The strongest among them bear markings that shimmer like the eyes of a spider, said to be kissed by the spider god itself. As the shamans build more and more tolerance to the venoms, their visions become clearer, their power grows, and they even become able to communicate with the arachnids. Those venom-drunk prophets became the leader of the tribes that now infest the Black Pit. Their settlements aren't towns, they're nests. Each webbed structure strung between dead trees, tunnels lined with bones and egg sacs. The goblins lived side by side with their monstrous kin. They were even able to train giants and gigantic spiders to be used as mounts in battle, swift, vicious, and unaffected by the most difficult of terrain. As the forest goblins' strength grew, rumours of their horrors started to spread to the empire of men, who soon mustered their strength and set off into the Drakworld to eradicate this new threat and cleanse the Drakworld of their filth. Witch hunters and Templars of Sigmar marched between lumbermen and road builders, dreaming of also carving a trade route from Middelheim to the Reich. They thought the forest old and sick. They had no notion it was alive. The torches of the humans burned bright at first, cannon fire flattened the trees, villages rose where spider webs once hung, stockades hammered into roots older than their faith, but the forest waited, and it watched. Then the goblins came, not as armies, but as whispers in the dark. Horses found drained, soldiers wrapped in silk, patrols vanished, their campfires burning cold come morning. From the black pit came the shamans, their chants echoing like insect wings, calling the arachnaroks from the deep. When the spiders marched, they brought the forest with them. Trees moved, roots split the earth, and the mist thickened. The Empire's line broke like old webbing. Knights fled through pathways that weren't there before. The few that staggered out spoke of spiders walking on the air, of the ground pulsing beneath their feet as if the whole forest breathed. They called it a war. Though no horns were sounded, no banners flown, in truth it was a slow strangling. A battle fought not in fields, but beneath canopies where light itself was the first to die. The Empire called it a cleansing gone wrong. The goblins called it the Great Feast. For a season, the Drakworld dripped red, and when the mist cleared, the roads were gone. The fort swallowed, and the forest silent once more. To this day, no banner flies in the Drakworld, only webs, only bones, and somewhere in the dark, a spider god waits, patient and hungry.
Subscribe!